So these masses that we used up in these to do formula mass, where do they come from? Because they actually don't exist. They actually do not exist. Okay, so where did they come from? Well, every element comes in different flavors. We call these flavors isotopes. Isotopes. What are isotopes? Isotopes are two atoms of the same element that have different number of neutrons. So same element, therefore they have the same protons, different number of neutrons. Different number of neutrons. So what we're going to find out in this lecture is how to determine these masses from the masses of each flavor, because these masses are actually the weighted percentage, the weighted atomic mass. What does it mean to be weighted? What does that mean? So every isotope has slightly different masses, okay? What are two examples of these isotopes? For example, carbon 14 and carbon 12. Carbon 14 and carbon 12. There is oxygen 16. There is oxygen 15. There's even oxygen 17. How do they differ? Well, let's look at that. So if it's carbon, how many protons does it have to have? I mean, it just has to have that. No. No. If it's carbon, you look on the periodic table and you find the number that's above. That number is, that is what we call the atomic number. So in order to be an isotope, you got to have the same atomic number, 6. And that makes you the same element. But the number of neutrons will be different. Carbon 14 has 8 neutrons. Carbon 12 has 6 neutrons. 8 neutrons, 6 neutrons. What about oxygen? What is the atomic number for oxygen? Malachi. 8. 8 minus 16, 8 neutrons. 15 minus 8, and 17 minus 8. So, as you can see, these different types of oxygen differ in the number of neutrons. And that makes them what? Isotopes. So if every isotope has a different mass, which one did they use to represent the element on the periodic table? They didn't. They didn't choose one. They came up with the weighted average. The weighted average. Okay, so what is a weighted average? It is an average resulting from the multiplication of each component by a factor reflecting its importance. It makes everything fair. If most of the element is an isotope, shouldn't the average be really close to it? Okay. Now, you guys should be familiar. You should be familiar with what a weighted average. Not from my class. I grade cumulatively. That means that I make my different assignments worth different amounts in order to give it worth. For example, I think tests should be the most important thing. So my tests are worth 100 points. I think labs should be worth second. So my labs are worth 40. And I think homework should be worth the least. Well, no, almost the least. And that is 10, and quizzes are anywhere from 4 to 6 to maybe 8 questions. So those are worth the least. So I give every type of assignment its worth by how many points. And then Skyward does this for you. Maybe you've learned to do it on your own, but basically what you do is you add up all the points that you have made, and then you divide it by the total possible points, and then multiply by 100 to get percentage. But perhaps your math teacher, does anyone have a class where everything's worth the same, 12 points? What is it? Everything's worth 100 points, whether it's a quiz or, okay. So how do they do this? Well, what formula will we use to determine the atomic mass? This one. And this is the same formula that Mr. Green uses, but he has calls it different thing. So atomic mass is equal to the mass of isotope A times its percentage over 100 plus the mass of isotope B times its percentage over 100 plus dot, dot, dot. What do I mean by the dot, dot, dot? It continues on. It continues on depending on how many isotopes. Sometimes you have 2 isotopes. Sometimes you can have 7 isotopes. So every isotope you have to do this for. And when you add up all the numbers, it will equal the mass that we have on the periodic table. All right, so it's hard for us to relate to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Joey's math grade, no, digital arts grade, in order to, and use this equation with it. Are you ready? So what have your tests been? I have access to your grade, which I don't. So for Joey, his tests have been 75%, that because he wasn't used to the way the tests work, but once he got Mr. Green's way of testing, he got a 90 and then a 95. Very nice on tests. Okay, so what else? What other assignments? So just regular assignment projects, big projects, right? So projects, the problem with projects is you have to work hard, and that's something that Joey really struggles with. So he got a 50, a 45, and then he decided, because his parents were going to take away his car or whatever, that he was going to actually work for the last one, and that's an 85%. Finally, daily assignments. These are little bitty things. And he got, because it was in class and he didn't have any other choice, he got a 95 and then a 90 and then a 33 because he didn't feel like working that day. All right, you know, this is chemistry, which means you should have calculators out. So if you don't, you need to have your calculator out. All right, so how does Mr. Green do it? I'm totally making this up, but he feels that the test should be 50% of his grade. And the project should be 40% of his grade. And the daily assignment should be 10% of his grade. So let's determine